Welcome to round 1. Winning the die roll, clearly going first. And quite a slow hand, but it has a battle screech, so I'm definitely not mulliganing this. Also, this grassland's already looking pretty nice, giving me the second white source that I'll need for the battle screech. It's gonna be a bit difficult to decide on the Armor of Thorns. I could play it on turn 3 just to get in for damage, but I know that on turn 4 I want to tap the Emissary, so that's actually not clear. Tranquil Thicket, so I'll most likely cycle that on turn 2, meaning that I might need the green source if I, for example, draw into Wild Mongrel. So there's no need to not show this to my opponent. I mean, it's very unlikely that the fact that I play the forest makes any difference for my opponent, so... Yep, no place here on my opponent's side. I want to cycle this, but it might be better just to get in for damage first. I'm not going to play Armor of Thorns into open mana here. Also, the danger of, yeah, whatever removal spell my opponent could have is just too high. I would love to find a creature with the Thicket, so that I'm safe from removal with the Battle Screech that I'm going to play next. And Trapper. Alright. It is a white creature, and that's all that counts, really. Nothing from my opponent. I might be playing against Storm, actually. Blue-black here, with all the Storm cards that we've seen. Alright, that's really unfortunate. Alright, my opponent got a Forest and the Battle Screech. I guess I had 2 lands and 2 spells, so that's not actually horrible here. Kind of unfortunate that I would need 3 white creatures and I only have 2. Otherwise, flashbacking the Battle Screech would still be great. So, Armadillo Cloak. Could put it on the Emissary. So then if the Emissary dies, my hand is pretty bad. But clearly I want the Trapper for other things, primarily. And I'm still safe from most of the removal spells in the format. I think that's a reasonable line here. If my opponent has a Repel to punish me, then it would be pretty bad if I had put it on the Trapper anyway. So let's see if that works out. Deep Analysis. Alright, I'll allow it. Yeah, so here's the white creature. I actually think it's best to flashback Battle Screech, although I'm losing out on 5 damage here. Otherwise, I'm just never flashing back the Battle Screech, and I don't think that's particularly viable. So let's put on the most pressure by having more threats in play. Otherwise, my opponent just draws into a solution to this, and I have nothing left. Nightscape Familiar. From now on, I really need to pressure my opponent, who might just be going off here. A second Deep Analysis could mean that a storm is coming up, basically. Crows and Vorin. Yeah, I would like to have that, actually. I could trade the Deathblow Elite with the Nightscape without putting Armor of Thorns on there, so that seems better than not playing the Vorin here. And I think I should be threatening lethal next turn, forcing my opponent to go off. I'm also dealing 7 here, so flashing back both of the Deep Analysis is not going to be possible. All in all, that looks reasonable. I'm also on 28, but that won't help me against Brain Freeze, which we've seen, the foil Brain Freeze. Quite important that the Familiar is not in play anymore, though. Dark Ritual. Yep, Dark Ritual. Opponent is doing it. Storm count is 1. Tapping everything, so no high tides. Probably. Another Dark Ritual. Storm count is 2. Dark Ritual. Storm count 3. Still hasn't drawn from Deep Analysis yet. Hasn't cast a High Tide, but clearly with 10 mana now, might actually be enough. I'm just hoping it's Tendrils because I can beat Tendrils. I probably can't Brain Freeze at this stage. If it's for enough spells, clearly. So Storm count is 4 right now. Opponent with 6 cards in hand. Maybe a Frantic Surge now. Obsessive Surge, Storm count 5. Brain Freeze for 6. And now maybe Yavgmoth will or another Brain Freeze. Yeah, alright. Yep, double Brain Freeze killed me there. Not much I could do about it. So I'm bringing in the Gilded Light, and I'm quite happy that I have these cards in my sideboard and not in the main deck. I could bring in Sudden Strength or Claws of Wirewood as ways to burn out my opponent, basically. That's going to be more efficient than having clunky other cards. Probably even the Grizzly Fate has to go. I don't want to play a late game of any kind against my opponent, so I can cut the 2 Grizzly Fates and put in the Sudden Strength. And I'm not sure about the Claws of Wirewood. Claws of Wirewood are just not amazing. Devout Witness might have a target against blue-black, but doesn't have to have one. So let's see if I have anything else. Crows and Tusk are clearly not helping me win quickly. And yeah, it's Claws of Wirewood versus Devout Witness, I think. That would be... Also, the Trappers are actually not amazing. Could see playing Claws of Wirewood over Banalish Trapper over one of them. Maybe even playing Devout Witness over the other Trapper. On the other hand, the Trapper is going to tap down the Familiar or just do a little bit of stuff. Whereas Claws of Wirewood are just never attacking. That's kind of the problem, kind of the issue. Let's see. Can I see a 0 Trapper build work? Yeah, I think I actually should. There's no reason to pay 2 mana for 1/2 if my opponent is just not concerned with playing creatures in any reasonable fashion. And then the burn plan with the Claws of Wirewood. Let's try it. And this hand is fine. It's lacking the green source, and I have 3 tapped green sources. But if I draw one of them, I'm in a great position because of Armor of Thorns. And I also have the turn 2 Solitary Emissary, so I don't have a bad draw by any means. Well, drawing green cards clearly not the best here. I think if my opponent plays Nightscape Familiar, I'm just trading with Deathblade Elite. Because if I draw a green source, I can still just drop Crows and Varine and have the same provoke action going on. Piana was a pretty good draw here. Let's see if that resolves. Now my Deathblade Elite will already be a 2/2 when attacking. Alright, my opponent has to think here for a little bit. Nothing. Alright. And Forest. I'll take it. Let's see if there is a cycled Choking Tethers. No, it isn't, so... I'm dealing quite a bit of damage here. Bring my opponent down to 8 and playing one more creature. So I will definitely have a lethal attack next turn. My opponent has to go off and hasn't played a single spell yet. I'm feeling pretty good about my chances here. Clearly, if my opponent has the double Brain Freeze again and gets up to either 10 Storm count or casts Brain Freeze for 5 and 6, then I'm dying. But that's a lot to ask from somebody who hasn't cast any spells yet. We'll see. I'm pretty clearly representing lethal next turn, especially with the Armor of Thorns and the provocability of Deathblade Elite. The only card that I can think of is Choking Tethers for my opponent to buy himself one more turn. That would actually be a good play. A good, well, play to buy time. Cloud of Fairies, Stormcount 1. Stormcount 2, 3. So my opponent doesn't have a Nightscape Familiar, otherwise he would have used the Cloud of Fairies to generate mana. Now maybe Deep Analysis, plus Flashback, something of that sorts to find something. Would have still been better to wait on the Cloud of Fairies, I think. If you don't generate mana with it, it's probably better to hold it in your hand if you can afford to. But if my opponent doesn't win this turn, then I think I'm just winning here. It's also possible that my opponent just wants to see my deck by playing this Brain Freeze here. Oh no, okay. Just bouncing everything I have with Temporal Fissure. But I don't know, I have 18 cards in my deck. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I don't really see my opponent beating me from this position. Maybe if my opponent's next play is Scrivener into Brain Freeze, and then maybe Yavknothville or something like that, that could definitely kill me. Let's provoke the Cloud of Fairies. Yes. And it's my opponent's turn again. Obsessive Search, Stormcount 1. No, that's not doing it. Alright, we did it. Not that we did much to get there, but yeah, it looks like we're just playing against a Brain Freeze deck. We just have to beat that, basically. No, I see no reason to move back to Grizzly Fate or Thopter Squadron now that this has worked out quite well. Sudden Strength and Calls of Wirewood are really just yeah, Miser's cards. I think they're just more likely to deal damage than Grizzly Fate or Thopter Squadron, at least in games that are close. Death Grasp still not good enough though. Alright. If I ever get that Gilded Light, I think I'm a huge favorite to win. Also, I have to hope that I don't get him to Torrect. That's, well, it has to be a good him. You can never be certain. At least every single card in my deck puts pressure on my opponent, which is pretty awesome. Alright, I'm on the draw for game 3, and my opponent keeps 7. I'm keeping 7 as well. This hand is amazing. So, yeah, with the turn 1 Deathblade Elite, turn 2 Wild Mongrel, and the whole Provoke Aura combo, I will get rid of any Nightscape Familiars as soon as I want. And the Wild Mongrel puts on a lot of pressure all by itself. The Grasslands, as I've said, not always great. Could actually not crack it to have more cards in my library. Great draw in Piana, and I'm just curving out here, hoping that my opponent isn't fast enough for what I'm doing here. The good thing here is really that Nightscape Familiar is not a card that my opponent can cast early. Maybe on turn 4, but then I'm forcing him to regenerate and all the... Alright, this is an interesting hymn. Crossing Variant in Plains. That's fine. It's not great for me, but it's I kept the piano, and I think that's the key. Forest is a pretty bad draw. Didn't want to draw forest. No reason to discard the 2 white mongrel at this stage. If I could bring my opponent down to 3, I would maybe do it to prevent flashback deep analysis from happening. But at this point, no reason to do so. Alright, deep analysis again. Yeah, this is pretty much a replay of game 1. Where my opponent also started with him into deep analysis. I do have to find the planes here. I don't want to see if I draw it naturally or not. And here, I think it's correct to hold back the forest because it's a card that I can discard to Wild Mongol. Even though I'm very likely to play it next turn. I get punished for that if I draw into a land and another 1-drop, Deathblade Elite or the Benevolent Bodyguard, and I could somehow play all of these cards, but I didn't because I played my land. So yeah, I guess I could have played the land, knowing that I was probably going to Sudden Strength next turn, just to deal extra points of damage. I might actually be attacking for lethal here, so let's see. That's 3, 6, 9, plus 3, 12, and I have at least 1 card to spare for the Wild Mongrel. My opponent doesn't know that it's going to be lethal though, or does he? If this is 3, 6, 9 already, yeah, my opponent actually knows that it's lethal because I could just discard to Wild Mongrel. So I'm forcing my opponent to go off on turn 5 after he cast a Hymn to Torak that didn't help his storming in any way, and a deep analysis that definitely did. So I'm facing 7 cards, 4 mana, and a potential 5th mana, which is why my opponent is tanking. I think I can still beat, what's it called, Temporal Fissure quite easily. And 28 cards in my library is still quite a lot, so I guess I could have waited with the grasslands, but I think it was very likely that I was going to sacrifice it anyway. If I draw plains, I could actually hold it back to have 1 more card in my library. But the question is if that's actually better than having the deck thinning and putting on more pressure that way. Also, I would have, in order to get an advantage out of that, I would have had to not crack the grasslands ever. So I would just have a dead card in play. Not the best thing, I would say. Alright, it looks like my opponent is going for it. I have 28 cards in my deck, so my opponent needs to cast a Brain Freeze for effectively 10. So Storm count has to be 9 before the Brain Freeze. Otherwise, there's only 27 cards getting milled, and then I have 1 more turn to win the game. Alright, the Nightscape Familiar changes things. I might still have lethal with Piana and Wild Mongrel though. Alright, now I definitely can't win next turn. So that a Brain Freeze for 1 less could potentially kill me. Quite a lot of spells, all familiar. If this discards an Obsessive Surge, then things are really going badly. Opponent is already on 4 spells this turn and could just, yeah, could just flashback Night's Deep Analysis as well. So this is spell number 5. Opponent has 4 mana, so not too many rituals casts though so far. This is the flashback deep analysis, putting my opponent back up to 5, but only 3 lands left and only 1 blue source. I think this could be quite good for me. Opponent basically needs rituals or frantic searches at this stage, and then still needs to kill me or bounce my permanents. Another Nightscape. A single blue left. Is this a brain freeze or is it just a passing of the turn? It is a brain freeze for 24 cards. Alright, I just have to let that resolve. I can't do anything about it. I'll have 4 cards left in my library. If my opponent has the second brain freeze, I'm dead. Not if I draw a Gilded Light, but I think that's in the graveyard. So I drew the 1-drop that I was talking about. So now this might be the turn where I actually get punished for not playing the land. It doesn't look too threatening here. I want to pick off at least one Nightscape, and I kind of want to threaten lethal, which I do best if I play the land. Let's see. Actually, I'm just threatening lethal no matter what. What I could try to do here is to bring my opponent to 3 or less with the help of Wild Mongol and Piana. But then I would have to cast Sudden Strength, assuming that Piana isn't being blocked. I think it's being blocked, but I'm still going to play the land. I think Sudden Strength is just powerful enough to do that. And this provokes a Nightscape Familiar because my opponent has the option to block with it anyway. And that way I take that option away from my opponent. Yeah, clearly my opponent has to block here because I'm attacking for lethal. But both Old Familiar and Cloud of Fairies aren't very important. Old Familiar actually being worse because Cloud of Fairies can be bounced and replayed to generate some mana, for example. One thing about Sudden Strength is that I actually deck myself earlier. So I might actually not want to do that. Interesting. So if Piana attacks my opponent down to 5 and I play Deathblade Elite, then my opponent has 1 more blocker and I'm pretty much threatening lethal the turn after because of Provoke on Deathblade Elite and the Sudden Strength that I'm going to be able to cast. So there's no reason to play Sudden Strength now, or is there? If I cast Sudden Strength now, my opponent will have 2 blockers for my 3 attackers, so I'm also attacking for lethal, but it's easier for my opponent to have something then. I'm not beating a Brain Freeze anyway, but with a Sudden Strength now, I could potentially beat Deep Analysis because my opponent wouldn't be able to flashback. The other thing is that I'm going down to 2 cards in my library, so that if my opponent has just a Temporal Fissure, I'm just more likely to die because I cast Sudden Strength. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like this and play the Deathblade Elite, I think. And then it's up to my opponent to find something here. Like I said, another Brain Freeze just kills me. Temporal Fissure, I'm playing around by not casting Sudden Strength here, and I opted not to make Deep Analysis weaker, which could end up costing me. Ophidian is a horrible card in Storm. Don't know why my opponent is playing that. It is a blue card that gets cheaper, made cheaper by Nightscape Familiar, but that's pretty much it. So what do I provoke here? The 3-power Deathblade Elite could actually provoke the Ophidian, so that my opponent doesn't get to attack back with it. On the other hand, the Ophidian might be forced to block anyway. Well, if the Ophidian is forced to block, then the Nightscapes are forced to block as well. So I'm just going to provoke the strongest creature my opponent has. Well, the strongest creature I can provoke, pretty much. And then this can provoke a Nightscape. Yes, and yes. There's an argument to be made to not provoke because it allows my opponent to make a mistake, but in general, if your opponent has an option and you take it away from him, it's always better than giving him the option. Except maybe for the fact that if the opponent plays around something, then you just can't win, basically. So I expect everything to be blocked here. I expect the Old Familiar to block Piana. It wouldn't make sense not to block with Old Familiar. My opponent has one alternative block, which is to keep Nightscape around and only chump block Wild Mongrel with Ul Familiar, which is kind of what I'm hoping for, because then my Sudden Strength is lethal. If my opponent blocks with everything, then he regenerates one of the Nightscapes and is still live to draw into Deep Analysis to kill me. Well, Deep Analysis actually kills me no matter what. I couldn't even have played around Deep Analysis because my opponent would have just targeted me with the Deep Analysis. Didn't even consider that at that time. So I might have not played around the Deep Analysis correctly because I realized that it would, because I didn't realize at that time it would kill me. On the other hand, I think if I cast the Sudden Strength to not allow the flashback of Deep Analysis, then the single Deep Analysis targeting me would also have killed me with my opponent just blocking like he did. So don't think I was winning there. But I'm kind of happy that I didn't play this. Now I still lose to Deep Analysis, but at least I gave myself more outs to beat it. Alright, this is quite exciting. I'm losing to quite a lot of cards, Scrivener being one of them. My opponent playing an island is not a good sign for him. So this on here, and my creatures grow. This is the 2/2. I wish to do this, and I don't wish to do this. So now my opponent needs something really good. And we got there. This was actually quite close, quite close. I really like Storm. And this was a pretty good Storm deck with double Brain Freeze and double Deep Analysis. 3 Nightscape Familiars, 3 Dark Rituals. I don't like the Ophidian, but other than that, this looked really, really strong. If my opponent had had one more turn, I might have been dead, just because my opponent can dig a little deeper. See you next round.